Sand had always kept its promises to Dr. Mara Velasquez. It buried secrets faithfully, and if a patient hand sifted through it long enough, it surrendered them just as faithfully. That consistency comforted her during seasons when nothing else in fieldwork felt predictable. Budgets, university politics, weather that ignored the forecasts. So, when a 2-year drought shrank the banks of the Arido Basin and exposed a terrace of basalt blocks no survey had ever noted, Mara believed the desert was keeping another promise: to reward persistence with revelation. The terrace crouched on a windswept plateau, its stones fused by an orange glaze like sun-fired glass. Drone images showed an oval structure nested inside the terrace, somewhere between a temple and a corral. So she chartered a helicopter, assembled a small team, and staked her tents close to the riverbed's cracked tongue. The field season began the first Wednesday of May. By Friday evening, they had opened a doorway into the oval. The interior was neither corral nor temple. A ring of benches carved from pumice circled a shallow pit, where narrow pillars rose like petrified vines. Instead of the usual murals or reliefs, the walls bristled with basalt nubs at shoulder height. On those nubs hung dozens of artifacts: discs, rods, spools of a copper-colored alloy, and slabs of translucent gypsum etched with finger-wide grooves. Each piece invited, almost demanded, to be held. Yet the air smelled of scorched almonds, which Mara's grandmother used to claim was the scent of warnings. Ethan Zhao, the project's youngest graduate student, unwrapped a polished disc and ran a palm across its undulating surface before Mara could bark a caution. He jerked his hand away as if shocked. "Static?" she asked. "Not exactly." Ethan flexed his fingers. "For a moment, I swear I felt something tugging inside the bones, like someone else's fingers clenching mine hard enough to splinter them." He chuckled to disguise the tremor in his voice. Obviously impossible. Mara recorded the incident in her field journal, tagging it as sensory artifact number 1. Then she banned bare-hand contact until the objects could be tested. Gloves, solvent baths, psych readings, the standard protocols. The team obeyed, but the chamber itself worked against them. Each time they re-entered, the arrangement of artifacts seemed subtly different, as though the relics migrated when no one watched. Jokes circulated about night-walking stones, but unease spread faster than humor. The first verifiable anomaly occurred 3 nights later. Mara sat in the lab tent cataloging fragments when a scream tore across camp. She sprinted toward the sound and found Ethan on his knees, vomit slicking the dust. He clutched his forearm. Beneath the latex glove, a bruise blossomed in the shape of a handprint. "No one touched me," he gasped. "I felt it all over again, only stronger, like whoever squeezed my arm wanted to snap it off." They sedated him, documented the bruise, packed ice. In the morning, the mark had faded, but Ethan's mood plummeted into a jagged silence. He helped with surface mapping, yet kept eyes averted from the artifacts. Mara felt the team's morale wobble, the way tent poles quiver before fabric rips free. Artifacts number 2 through number 19 tested negative for toxins, pathogens, radioactivity, or electric charge. The alloy contained unusual ratios of copper, arsenic, and tin. Nothing extraordinary. Under UV light, the pieces fluoresced in shifting spirals, as though a dye embedded in the metal responded to sweat vapor. Still, nothing explained tactile hallucinations. Mara shipped 3 items to the university's materials lab. Dr. Indira Patel, head of analysis, called a week later to say her assistant had mishandled a rod while imaging it. He insisted the metal grew hot, blistered his palm. Temperature loggers show ambient 22 degrees. He's embarrassed, but I'm flagging the sample. Indira attempted a laugh, though her voice sounded canned. Probably psychosomatic. The next day, Mara received news that the same assistant was admitted to hospital under psychiatric watch, having lacerated his own arm with laboratory glass. The cuts matched the pattern etched on the rod's surface. Concentric rings of grief. Mara locked the excavation chamber and quarantined all movable finds. She framed the decision as a duty of care, yet unease sharpened into fascination. The sight felt like a half-heard confession, a language of sensations not yet deciphered. She spent 2 nights reading up on mirror touch synesthesia, contagious mass hysteria, and medieval relic cults. None fit. During the 3rd week, heavy winds uncovered a sub-level beneath the oval. A hidden stair twisted down into bedrock. The team gathered at the rim. Ethan hung back as if gravity itself repelled him. Mara descended first. Her headlamp skated across walls ribbed with coiled copper filaments. At the stair's base sprawled a chamber twice the size of the one above. The floor was segmented into tessellated slabs of black glass, each slab engraved with a different part of the human body: palms, tongues, eyelids, spleens. In the center rose a tree-like column bearing dozens of socketed grooves. Almost every groove held an artifact identical to those above, but these were connected to the filament network by thin wires, as though forming a nervous system. On the far wall glimmered text in dot and dash depressions, hardly script, more like Braille for giants. When Mara traced a gloved finger across the first line, vibrations pulsed through the glove, not mechanical, but biological, as if she ran her hand along the throat of a singer striking low notes. She ordered total photo documentation, then retreated to cross-reference any symbol sets in their corpus. None matched. That evening, Ethan approached her with a confession. "I've been dreaming," he said. "But it's not my dream. I'm lying in a stone hall with people around me. They press artifacts into my hands. When I grip them, I feel the pain of the person across from me. It's like sharing a language made of wounds." "You're reliving their rituals," Mara said before she could stop herself. "Maybe. Each time I wake, I'm convinced my bones have shifted to accommodate someone else's injuries." He rolled up his sleeve. Faint purple capillaries spidered under the skin, arranging themselves into symmetrical branching patterns Mara had seen engraved on artifact number 4. She felt her own pulse quicken. She should have pulled Ethan from field duty. Instead, she requested additional psychological monitoring, then continued excavating. They mapped every slab, photographed every groove. The pattern of body parts formed a spiral path leading from the perimeter toward the central column, like pilgrims walking a labyrinth. At each turn, the floor glyphs grew redder, as if the stone had rusted under centuries of blood. Mara began translating the wall text using a brute algorithm. She hypothesized each dot-dash cluster corresponded to nerve clusters rather than phonemes, a semantic system encoding sensation directly. After 72 hours, she broke the first sentence: "You will know my suffering as your own." The second sentence required longer. "Shared torment purifies the self, unifies the many." The third refused translation, but the partial symbols suggested recursion, an instruction to repeat until wholeness. It reminded her of pathological feedback loops in neuroscience, where pain perception amplifies through expectation. The pieces clicked. This civilization communicated through tactile hallucinations. Intentionally, their artifacts were neural keys storing the echo of a person's pain. Passing an artifact to another transferred that echo, allowing the receiver to experience injuries firsthand. Empathy weaponized into information. Why? Mara pictured a society without writing, where history recorded itself as accumulated nerve memories. Joyful sensations would fade quickly, but pain sears. It persists, instructs, warns. Pain could be archived, replayed, taught. Maybe they believed empathy required equivalence. To advise a friend with a broken leg, one must feel a broken leg. Echo enough people, and knowledge becomes total. Yet what happens when suffering stacks without release? Ethan provided the answer in dreadful clarity. On the 32nd day of excavation, he disappeared before dawn. They found him in the lower chamber, seated against the central column, an artifact clasped to each hand. His gloves lay shredded on the floor, fingernails split. A map of bruises tattooed his torso as though multiple attackers had worked in unison. Beside him, a notebook, his field journal, was open to a final scrawl. "I am all of them now." He survived barely, with compound fractures in both thumbs, the only injuries physically present. The rest were hallucinations strong enough to stress his body into shock. He was medevaced to the capital. Funding agencies froze grants, citing safety concerns. The University Ethics Board ordered Mara to suspend operations pending review. The rest of her team packed and left within 48 hours. She offered no resistance. Officially, she agreed to seal the site until better protocols existed. Unofficially, she stayed. The desert rolled beneath full moon, silvering her solitary camp. Without colleagues to restrain her, Mara crossed the perimeter at midnight, descended into the lower chamber, and sat before the column. She studied the artifacts silently gleaming in their sockets. Each one housed a testimony of suffering. All those voices waited for bodies through which to speak. She picked the smallest disc, artifact Yanuana 27. Its copper ridge fit the curve of her palm like a design tailored by centuries. She inhaled once, slipped off her glove, and closed her fingers around the metal. Nothing happened for a heartbeat. Then, the world inverted. She was no longer in her body, but in another's. A child, skin raw from sunburn, feet on scorched sand. Somewhere unseen, drums pounded. Hands, dozens, seized her arms. Not maliciously, pleadingly. Each grip delivered a shard of anguish. A split lip, a kidney stone, childbirth tearing flesh, the sting of salt in eye sockets. None lasted longer than a blink, yet they overlapped into a lattice of exquisite torment. The disc fell from her hand, clanging on basalt. She vomited bile, retched until throat bled. Air rasped like needles through lungs. But with the pain surfaced comprehension. Within each shard lay information. She understood how the child's sunburn smelled of the season when crops failed, how the kidney stone correlated with flint impurities in local wells, how the torn womb served as warning against breech births. Pain wasn't just communication. It was data packaging. Mara crawled back up the stair and collapsed outside the chamber, sweat freezing under starlight. Every nerve in her body screamed, but behind the scream vibrated a dangerous exhilaration. She had glimpsed a new epistemology, one that bypassed abstraction and went straight to embodied knowledge. It felt profound, even holy. She also knew it was lethal. She recorded a voice memo at sunrise. Artifacts act as mnemonic conductors. Touch triggers transfer of stored nociceptive patterns from previous user to next, amplified by unknown mechanism, possibly quantum entanglement of ion lattice. Transmission is cumulative. Each holder adds personal pain to archive, increasing payload. Civilization likely experienced exponential growth of shared agony leading to extinction. She could have stopped there, labeled the site biohazardous, called for military sealing. Instead, she asked the question any archaeologist asks when faced with a lost world. How much can be recovered before it disappears forever? Over the next 9 nights, Mara designed experiments. She welded forceps to carbon rods, allowing metallic contact without skin conduction. She built Faraday cages around sample boxes, hypothesizing that electromagnetic resonance modulated transfer. She exposed lab rats. Ethics had already been violated beyond repair. 2 artifacts while measuring EEG and cortisol. Rats exhibited convulsions consistent with seizure activity, then self-gnawed tails until removed. An outside observer would have condemned the work as madness. Mara justified it as triage. Understand the mechanism quickly enough to contain it. Her logs filled with cross-references. Echo amplitude proportional to artifact surface area. Pain signatures degrade if artifact submerged in saline electrolyte under low-frequency ultrasound. Vacuum storage ineffective. Neural echo appears non-chemical. Results contradicted themselves hourly. Meanwhile, she noticed cuts on her own arms she couldn't recall making, bruises blooming like ink blots where no object had struck. She wore thick bandages under sleeves, rationed caffeine to silence tremors. Indira Patel flew out unannounced, guided by GPS pings she'd secretly requested. She found Mara in the upper chamber, cataloging the last unsampled piece, a copper mask shaped like a closed fist. "Mara, you need to shut this down," Indira said, voice cracking. "Ethan tried to jump from his hospital window last night. He claimed he was returning the pain to the sky. Please, people are unraveling." Mara stared at her friend. She wanted to explain that the pain wasn't malevolent. It merely sought hosts to remain remembered. If they sealed the site, the echo would still reach someone someday. Better to decode and diffuse it now, even if the price was high. Instead, she said, "Help me test one more variable." Indira's eyes glistened with anger, or fear, perhaps both. "We put on gloves," Mara assured. "Only momentary contact. Together, maybe the signal splits and dilutes." Against her better judgment, Indira agreed. They locked the entrance, prepared syringes of diazepam in case of seizure, set cameras rolling. They grasped the mask simultaneously through nitrile gloves, then touched its cold surface with 2 bare fingertips each. Pain thundered through them, but it was different from Mara's earlier session. The agony arrived split, a stereo channel feeding half the signal to each brain. They felt fractures but not their location, tasted blood without choking, heard screams muffled as though underwater. They survived 30 seconds before Indira tore away, sobbing. While they recovered, Mara realized the mask embodied a communal limiter, a governor to distribute burden across participants. The ancient ones had engineered artifacts for group sharing, attenuating the lethal dose. If modern holders engaged alone, they swallowed the undiluted archive and drowned. Hope flared. Perhaps technology to dissipate echoes existed somewhere deeper within the ruin, a release valve that had failed or been forgotten. If she found it, she could neutralize the danger without erasing the knowledge. They descended again, this time co-anchored by braided climbing rope so any convulsions would not separate them. In the far corner of the lower chamber lay a slab they had dismissed as foundation stone. Under black light it revealed hairline seams. They pried it open with crowbars. A smell like damp ashes wafted out. Below waited a crypt no taller than a crawl space. Inside sat a single artifact, a prism of obsidian encased in copper wire. Unlike others, it emitted a low hum audible to the teeth more than the ears. Etched on its face, in the same nerve code, glowed 4 brief clauses. Mara translated aloud. "Pain is the seed. Memory is the root. Compassion is the flower bury us when bloom has passed." "It's a tombstone," Indira whispered. "An instruction to enter them, and the technology, after a certain threshold." Mara understood. The civilization had recognized the contagion late, but not too late. They constructed a capacitor to absorb the cumulative archive and commanded survivors to seal it. Bury us. End the loop. Someone, perhaps the very last of them, obeyed. And Mara had dug it back up. She pictured the chain already spreading. Ethan, lab assistants, herself, Indira, countless future curators once artifacts reached museums. A pandemic of empathetic self-harm, people injuring themselves under the illusion they carried whole populations' wounds. There was only one solution left, concealed in the ancient directive. Rebury them, or rather, ensure the capacitor devoured every remaining echo first, then entomb the entire site permanently. They carried the prism into the lower chamber's center and began transferring artifacts onto its facets. With each contact, vibrations coursed louder, copper wires glowed dull red. The prism drank the pain like a furnace inhaling coal. Hallucinations battered their senses. Eyes gouged, spines snapped. But because they worked swiftly, sharing the load, neither collapsed. At last, only the mask remained. Mara lifted it with bare hands, offered it to Indira. Together they pressed it against the prism. A sound like a thunderclap without air rattled the chamber. The copper wires around the prism liquefied, sealing the joints. The hum ceased. Whatever energy animated the artifacts vanished. They packed nothing out except field journals and camera drives. Mara drafted a report classifying the site as a cultural mortuary and recommending non-disturbance per international heritage statutes. She added an appendage requesting design of a concrete sarcophagus to be poured over both chambers, citing seismic instability as pretext. 2 days later, a storm filled the plateau with silt, erasing footprints. Bureaucratic wheels would grind for months before permits issued. By then, the site would look unremarkable to satellite eyes. Mara mailed coordinates without annotation to an ecological restoration fund known for buying land for wildlife corridors. She trusted entropy to do the rest. Back at the university, she and Indira underwent psychiatric evaluation. They repeated the official story. Minor exposure to neurotoxic metals caused hallucinations. Excavation terminated. Their colleagues accepted the narrative with polite relief. Ethan, released from hospital, remembered little beyond nightmares of mirrors cracking. Yet Mara's fingertips sometimes tingle, phantom echoes reminding her that seeds of pain are hardy. She keeps the sensation close, a rosary of nerves, a penance, and a promise. Most nights she can almost forget the language written under skin. On other nights she wakes certain she hears drums and feels distant hands reaching for her across time. Then she closes her eyes, presses palms against each other, and whispers to the dark, "Memory is the root. Compassion is the flower. Let the desert keep its promises.